where this huge influx of chachma is going to come into the world, and we can decide how we're going to experience it. So the Orthodox world did not let it come in very much. They blocked it a lot of ways. So what had happened is it came in concept of haskalah and things like that, and people were flourishing intellectually, but they were doing it in a way to leave Torah. And the Torah was becoming something which is less intellectually deep. It was more, like we said before, very stuck in its way. Like we're going to be truthful to Hashem no matter what, which is a beautiful midah. But it was done in a way to deflect anything that was going to explain stuff. So you had Sfarim like
this. You can see like throughout the generations, people like thought things were true, like with all the heart, and it clearly wasn't. And then the world carries on, and then you have the same cycle. It repeats again and again. How do we know that we do know what is truth now?
So the concept of truth is always relative, because the only thing that really is emes is Hashem. Everything else is our perception.
Right. So how do we know that we perceive it right?
You can 100% be convinced you don't see everything right. No question. That's not your job.
If you want to do everything right, you wanna like believe in the right thing. Like, how do you know what is actually the right thing?
So you can only know with the kalim you were given, and that's what's necessary for you to do in your life. In other words, the fact that someone lived and didn't see the full truth in that generation wasn't necessarily a problem. That's what that generation needed to accomplish. Right? You look back at somebody and they didn't have the same opportunities of understanding that you have because you live in a digital world, or you live in a world that the idea of robotics is right. You can have a totally different way of understanding everything.
Right, but let's say somebody that was in the days of Shabbos and Tzvi went with it, right? I would assume like will be coming down again for a new Gilgal to fix whatever happened, like for them joining Islam and believing all the crooked ideas that he had. So how do we know that what we do now is also like not just an endless game?
It's not endless. See, there's two things you have to realize. First of all, the kalim that you have are enough to have, and therefore whatever maskanas you come, assuming your process is good, which means you have midos tovos, right? You're motivating yourself by good belief systems, and you actually really think about stuff. You're not just like going with the flow. You're actually analyzing, which is called amelis haTorah. Assuming you do that, you're going to do your job perfectly. Now, it doesn't mean your job is going to be full, that in this Gilbert you can do everything. It's very possible that the world's in evolution, and therefore this generation does this much, this generation does this much. The reason we're coming back is not only because, hey, you screwed up, you got to come back. It's because the world is one big cycle, and now we need to move from here to here, and then we can move from here to here because it was here to here. So you come back after things were fixed. So don't look at reincarnation as just a punishment. It's a process. You were given a lot of steps in your life, and you do them gradually. It's like the same way that when you're 20 years old, you don't say like, oh, when I'm fixing the stuff when I was 13 because I really should have done it when I was 13. No, you're not supposed to when you're 13. You're supposed to do a 13-year-old 13. But as a 20-year-old, you're looking back on the 13 and saying, what I thought and then was only that understanding. Now I understand it better. But you couldn't have understood it as a 20-year-old as you went through as a 13-year-old, right? So it's a process. The problem with feeling process is that people assume it as a negative way. It's like a judgment. It's like you should have, you could have, you failed, and now you have to come back. It's not at all true, necessarily. Could be. But it's also true that the world has to process things because that's what we're holding. You need this to experience to get to this experience, to get to this experience, to get to this experience. Make sense to you? So the main point I was trying to give over is that the main point I'm trying to give over is that we find this issue in Klal Yisrael is the need for us to be very strongly connected and truthful to Hashem sometimes causes us as a people to deny other people from asking questions and finding deep answers. And it comes out even in the expression of them fighting really amazing people who had real truth to them, like Rabbi Ramchal, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Nachman, the Baal Tanya, whatever the Rebbe from the Chassam Sofer, he was also the Roid of Temad Mavis, right? All these people were huge people, and 200 years later, like, oh, they're amazing, but when they came out, because they were changing society, they were looked at as problems. So we as a kahakila don't like when people rock the boat and deal with things that are like, wait a minute, this thing has to be rethought about this whole thing.
20 years ago, hated Shlomo Carlebach, and now they all have Carlebach Binyanim.
Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Shlomo Carlebach is a perfect example. Shlomo Carlebach and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rav Yosef are all perfect examples of people who in their times had a tremendous amount of controversy. But 20 years down the road, the impact they all had is going to stay forever, right? Way beyond what they had in their lifetime, and you can say whatever you want. That they're real, right? So it's exactly like that. And will be more people like that, and there have been many other people like that. So what we need to learn from that is that you're going to experience, when you ask your questions, you're going to experience some people being freaked out by that. And they're going to try to stomp you out. Because they feel insecure that someone's asking questions and might come to an answer different, and might, like someone you always says, like, who's not here today, they always say, well, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. Right, of course it's dangerous, because life is full of possibilities, right? But if you don't ask questions, you'll never get to any good answers. So people are scared of the possibility of people making the wrong decision. So they try. There's a whole sheet out there, and it's called many different things over the generation. It makes no difference what it is, to block any type of advancement to thought and depth. Pneumis Torah is all about, let's look at things deeper. And the children nowadays are coming to a point where they're saying, if you don't give me something deeper, I won't participate. That did not have to happen. That's a reaction. If we as a kehila would have embraced the questions and learned emuna and learned why from at least 50 years ago, but for sure earlier than that, things like the Ramchal and the Baal Shem Tov and the Rabbi Nachman and all the other parts of Tisrei Torah wouldn't have been pushed down, then people would be holding a different place now. Be much more able to, it would be natural for a person looking for meaning to find it. But since it wasn't that way, now there's a reaction. The kids are going to say, no, now I'm not ready. Now I'm not even willing to do until you produce those answers. That's an unfortunate product, but a necessary product for us to evolve, because the thing that pushes people the most to change their stuckness is they have no choice. Because they want their kids to be happy, they want their kids to be with them and things they believe in, so they're going to have to say, okay, now we have to find answers. And that's really the gilui of what Rav Yisrael and I said, that in the Geula Acharona, the thing that's going to pull people out of galus is Pneumis Torah. Because he was saying that if they don't have, the Torah is going to be nishkach. The Gemara in Shabbos says in Kuf Mem Ches that asid haTorah lishtakeach. The Torah is going to be forgotten. And Rav Yisrael and I said, no, it's not going to be forgotten. And the explanation is the Chachamim were saying, according to their understanding of Torah, people in Dor Achron will not do it. They won't, because they don't connect to the rules, and when they're not connecting, they won't do it. Rav Yisrael is saying, don't worry, I'll give you.
Connect to the rules and we don't do it. Why would God take us out?
Okay, so to understand why God takes you out of galus, you have to look in Mitzrayim. That's why He made Mitzrayim. The reason God took people out of galus in Mitzrayim wasn't because they did mitzvahs.
So, shall we go be missionaries in the Hasidic community maybe, and help them get closer, help us get closer to His time already?
By what? By having not do mitzvahs?
Yeah.
No. It doesn't mean that. It means that the relationship goes way beyond the actual actions. The changes people go through inside, let's say in Mitzrayim, for 210 years, they look like they were just slaves, but they're actually becoming more pure. Right? So, galus works. He knows what he's doing. People are holding in a more elevated place than they were before. Even if you see less practical mitzvahs, you should know the people are very elevated. And therefore they're good. That's the reason they're asking these questions. So the galus is for sure going to happen. If you doubt galus, you're basically doubting the neshama that Hashem put in us. A Jew will always come back. He will always find his source and figure out how he can get closer. Because his neshama will never be happy otherwise.
Right.
So geula, the way that the Torah speaks about it in Dvarim, is for sure going to happen. The question is just how painful, how fast, how these type of things. So we're not worried about geula. But just the process of geula you see nowadays, where kids are like saying, "I'm not worried until you give me Torah shel geula. I'm not doing it." Make sense?